Good morning. This is Northern Light for Tuesday, June 18th. I'm Monica Sandreski. It's going to be hot this week. Temperatures in the 90s today through Thursday, and these heat waves are going to happen more often. The North Country is warming at twice the global average.
One of the more positive aspects of this extra heat is we are getting more precipitation. Now, it's changing from snow over to rain.
More from SUNY ESF professor Richard Ross Shaker coming up. Also, because of the Canadian wildfire smoke last summer, state officials are asking New Yorkers to monitor air quality every day this summer. And our book reviewer Betsy Kepes stops by to talk about a novel set in St. Lawrence County about two sisters who try to hide the fact that their parents abandoned them.
Well, there's a lot of sad things in this book, but actually it's not a sad book. This is a sister story about two girls whose only stability in their childhood was each other.
More on Amy Smith Linton's novel, She Taught Me Everything, coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us. Support for Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio comes from Fisher, Bassett, Muldowney, and McCardle, attorneys and counselors at law, with offices in Malone, Tupper Lake, and Saranac Lake, 800-941-5001, and by the Adirondack Foundation, making grants to nonprofits that address community issues of childcare, attainable housing, career pathways, basic needs, and more. AdirondackFoundation.org. This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski. The entire North Country is under an extreme heat advisory for the next 3 days. Heat indices are forecasted to reach 100 degrees. Health officials are encouraging people to stay out of the heat, especially midday, to drink plenty of water and use their local cooling center if needed. These heat waves are part of a new normal for the Adirondack North Country as climate change brings more extreme weather events. Emily Russell spoke with Professor Richard Ross Shaker, who studies climate change and sustainable resource management at SUNY ESF. He says the data from recent decades confirms that the region is warmer at a rate more than twice the global average.
This is not a big surprise to me. It is very unfortunate. I know it puts a lot of people at risk, but in terms of the statistical models, which sometimes get a lot of opposition, they are hitting pretty strong in the accuracy. So this is our new normal. We're seeing the temperatures increase at an increasing rate and more of those heat wave days. Also because we had a mild winter overall and we already had kind of increased higher temperatures, this is just par for the course.
So when we think about temperature, I mean, it just being potentially in the 90s this week. And as you say, we had a warmer winter. Like, what does that heat actually do to like the natural landscape in our region?
Yeah, great question. So regarding heat and what it does to the natural landscapes, how it ultimately impacts people, but the first thing it does is it starts to water stress the vegetation, the soil, and then you start to have an increase or a decrease actually in fuel moisture. So you'll actually warm up or dry out the fuel, and that could potentially cause forest fires. And once you start losing your vegetation, then you start to see stress throughout the whole food web. So it starts to cause major problems. Obviously, in more urban environments, you have major health concerns. Heat's the number one weather-related killer. It's linked to famine, of course. That's why it gets that. But also, it's linked to infant mortality. It's linked to elderly mortality. So asthma rates and other more cardiovascular problems are all linked to increased heat temperature.
The Adirondacks, while they are warming, what I've heard is that more than twice the rate of the global average. But the Adirondacks has been seen as a kind of climate refuge. So I wonder, how you think the region should be thinking about that role and developing sustainably in the face of this reality.
Yeah, so I've seen a couple of different projections with climate scenarios, kind of putting us out to 2080. On the lower end of temperature increase, the state average temperature projections are supposed to see roughly 3 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's across the whole state. When we get a little bit closer to the central and north, I've seen projections all the way up to 8.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's quite significant in temperature increase by 2080, but precipitation was projected to be roughly a 10% increase. So when we think of climate change and we hear about global warming, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to affect us in different ways. So one of the more positive aspects of this, when we think about at least this heat, this extra heat, is we are getting more precipitation. Now, it's changing from what we were historically used to getting. So in Adirondacks, you're used to getting a lot more snow season in your precipitation, and now the snow season's shrinking, and that precipitation is changing from snow over to rain. So we are very fortunate. It's a massive, intact, beautiful ecosystem, which makes it very resilient to climate change, and we're fortunate to have it. So we just have to try to preserve it, make sure we're managing the forest appropriately, being mindful that if we are having any kind of droughts, that puts us at risk for forest fires. And some fires good. We have some great experts in our department, actually, that do forest fire management, and some of it's good. And you need that kind of events to occur, but you have to be careful that you don't end up with a massive natural disaster.
Yeah, I wonder, as we're facing this heat wave and just, future of an increasingly warming climate, what do you think is the biggest risk that the Adirondack North Country faces when it comes to a changing climate?
I think the most difficult thing for most people to comprehend is that although we're seeing these changes, and the previous generation will talk about how it used to snow perhaps at Halloween and now it doesn't and things like that, but we're increasing at such a fast rate that our species, through their natural cycle of growth and through the breeding process, they are not evolving fast enough to keep up with the climate change. So you have these climate shifts, and that's going to be very difficult. So some of these species you're going to end up having die off because of their inability to adapt to the changing climate. The warmer and wetter doesn't sound all that bad, but these species were accustomed to not as significant of a change. So those are kind of the greatest concerns that I see. It's a much longer term trend than just maybe one lifetime, but in a couple lifetimes, we could actually see some significant die-off, and because our species are not adapting fast enough to the climate change.
That was SUNY ESF professor Richard Ross Shaker speaking with Emily Russell. NCPR's Climate Change series is made possible through the generous support of Margot and John Ernst. This is NCPR. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's about 10 after 8. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski. So glad you could join us. Coming up on the show, our book reviewer Betsy Kepes stops by to share a sister story with roots in St. Lawrence County. That's in just a few minutes right here on Northern Light, which is supported by Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. and by citizen advocates enabling people with developmental disabilities to live meaningful, self-chosen, and safe lives since 1975. Online at citizenadvocates.net. Music now by I Am Snow Angel out of Lake Placid. This artist is part of NCPR's Underscore project. That's where musicians throughout the North Country submit instrumental music for a host to play, like Shelley Pike and Doyle Dean to play during their breaks while they're hosting on the air. And you hear it every morning here on Northern Light. If you're a musician and you'd like to share your music with the North Country, send some in and reach out at radio@ncpr.org. Last June, record-breaking wildfires swept across Canada, which created major air quality problems here in the North Country. This summer, with more smoke possible, the Department of Environmental Conservation is encouraging New Yorkers to check air quality more often and be proactive about changing their plans. NCPR intern Skylar White reports.
Remember last summer when the sky was red and hazy and we started checking a website called airnow.gov to make sure we could go outside? This summer, state officials want us to keep doing that. Dr. Jim McDonald is the commissioner of the New York Department of Health. He says that monitoring air quality should be the new normal in a changing climate.
The climate's changed, and we need to be prepared for developing healthy habits for how we stay healthy during the summer in New York.
McDonald spoke with reporters in a webinar last week. The main habit he wants folks to build is checking airnow.gov or their weather app every morning before planning their day.
When I see the air quality, I look at the number and decide if I need to change what's going on.
McDonald says the air in New York is typically pretty pristine, between 0 and 50 on the air quality index.
But, as that number goes higher, it definitely affects our health and well-being.
Once it gets above 100, vulnerable individuals should reassess plans to go outside. Once it's above 150, everyone in the population should take note. McDonald also reminds us that summer air quality changes come from lots of different things, not just wildfires.
Whether it's from increase in particulate matter, ground level ozone, whether it's from carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, these all contribute to what could be an adverse air quality.
While there's no immediate threat of air pollution from fires right now, the DEC is monitoring the conditions of some parts of Canada that are at risk. They plan to send advisories if air quality becomes a concern, but McDonald says it's important that folks keep looking for themselves.
There's that old expression, an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure.
If we can avoid air pollution exposure, McDonald says, we'll be able to enjoy the clear, beautiful summer days we do have that much more. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Skylar White in Canton.
A well-known diner just north of Watertown was severely damaged by a fire over the weekend. According to WWNY-TV, fire crews were called to Longways Diner around 6:30 Sunday morning. Owner Beverly Waltz told the TV station that she panicked when she heard the news, but says she's thankful for the local response.
We're all family. It's helped with all the support from them. And with the community keep coming in and stopping and checking on us and making sure that we're okay.
Longways Diner suffered smoke and water damage, though the nearly 60-year-old building wasn't a total loss. Waltz says they hope to rebuild. A school district in Jefferson County is voting again on its budget for next year. The Belleville-Henderson School District's original budget failed to pass last month. It exceeded the state's tax cap, so required a supermajority, which the budget didn't get. The new $12.6 million spending plan no longer includes the purchase of a school bus, so it will only require a majority to pass. Voters in the Belleville-Henderson School District can cast their ballots on the revised budget today from 2 until 8 p.m. in the main foyer of the school. 2 North Country communities mismanaged their finances, according to audits by the state controller's office. First, village officials in the Washington County town of Argyle didn't enforce late in missing water bill payments, which cost the village revenue and thousands in penalties. They also failed to enforce dozens of unpaid accounts totaling nearly $15,000, according to the state controller's report. And the Crown Point Fire District couldn't provide important documents for most of the period the state audited. The state also found that between the years of 2018 and 2022, the fire district in Essex County failed to file required financial reports and audits. New York Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie says he has questions about Governor Kathy Hochul's proposal to reinstate a pre-pandemic ban on people wearing masks in public. Karen DeWitt reports from Albany.
Hochul says she's considering revising and reinstating an 1845 law that bans wearing masks in public to respond to increased incidents of crime and threatening behavior in the New York City subways and other places where perpetrators wear masks to conceal their identity. She first made the comments in response to a question in an interview on CNN. She was asked about the call by some Jewish leaders to ban masks in light of the rash of protests against the Israeli-Hamas war, where many demonstrators wear them. She has since repeated her views, saying she won't tolerate individuals using masks to evade responsibility for their behaviors.
People who are wearing masks who are able to commit crimes because they're now undetected. It's a challenge for our law enforcement.
The mask law was repealed at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in the spring of 2020. Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie says the governor has reached out to him on the issue, but he has some concerns, including how to carve out exceptions for legitimate mask wearing, like during a pandemic, or if someone wants to keep themselves or others safe from germs.
She did raise it with me, and those were pretty much my questions.
But Hastie says he's open to trying to work out a solution.
I think it's a conversation we need to have about figuring it out. People have found a way to go around the system or laws that's in place. You always got to try to counteract that. But there's challenges with that, for religious reasons, for health reasons.
Hochul says she does not envision outlawing surgical masks for people who are sick or when there's a contagious outbreak. And she says those masks only partially cover the face.
A surgical mask, as we became very used to seeing, doesn't cover most of your face. It covers a portion of your face. Some of the masks that have been used in this the assault on the subway train, that covers everything but your eyes. So there's a distinction in the types of masks.
Both the governor and the Assembly Speaker are not ruling out a return to Albany before next January to address the mask issue, but they say it's too early yet to make any definitive plans. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt for the New York Public News Network.
This is NCPR. You're listening to Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. It's about 20 after 8. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski. So glad you could join us. Coming up in just a minute, our book reviewer Betsy Kepes stops by for a book review this month. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note, the link between birds and alligators, coming up at 8:42. But first, let's take a look at the weather. At last check, it was 73 degrees in Malone, 72 in Cape Vincent, 74 degrees in Lake George, 69 in Long Lake, and 75 degrees in Plattsburgh. We can expect some isolated showers in the Tug Hill Plateau and in the central Adirondacks today, but that should be clearing out by around lunchtime. Temperatures expected to rise into the 90s today, tomorrow, and Thursday. That has spurred the National Weather Service to issue a heat advisory for the entire region through Thursday. with temperatures so hot, and heat indices could reach into the hundreds, into the triple digits. They are recommending that residents drink plenty of water, stay in air-conditioned rooms and out of the sun, to check in on your relatives and neighbors that may not be able to get out or may not have an air conditioner installed. And also to take precautions when outside, to wear lightweight, loose-fitting clothing, limit your strenuous activities to the early morning or evening, and reminder not to leave young children and pets in unattended vehicles, because the inside of cars can reach lethal temperatures in just a matter of minutes. So just make sure to check in on the folks in your life that may be at most risk. In a new novel, two school-age sisters in the North Country hide the fact that their parents have abandoned them. Our book reviewer, Betsy Kepes, joins us to talk about Amy Smith Linton's novel, She Taught Me Everything. Good morning, Betsy.
Good morning, Monica. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's so good to have you here in our very first book review together.
Yay, hopefully one of many more.
Many more to come, exactly. So what's She Taught Me Everything about?
Well, in this novel, the younger sister, Nikki, is only in 8th grade when her parents, Magda and John, disappear. Her sister, Viv, is a senior in high school, and she fakes her parents' signatures whenever they need something to sign, and so nobody will know they live alone. Then they move to Potsdam the next year when Viv goes to college at SUNY.
Do the girls have enough money to survive?
Their parents left them some cash, and both girls get jobs. Here's Nikki. A few days before this first Christmas alone, Viv had forbidden me to miss our parents. "Don't you see how lucky we are?" she said, shaking me by the upper arms. "We can do anything. They can't tell us what to do. We don't have to slink around trying not to irritate John or pretend to be glad that they got you another stupid set of crayons." I was frightened of what might happen to my sister and me on our own. What if we were caught and put in foster care? But it was like stepping into the sunshine, not to have the constant worry and responsibility of John's temper and Magda's sadness.
Well, don't they have some relatives that they could call up, or who they could live with?
No. In fact, the parents seem to be on the run and don't trust anyone. The family has lived in rental houses in Carthage, Cape Vincent, and Natural Bridge, and Dexter. The sisters learned to pack up and leave on very short notice.
So I'm sort of picking up, is it a mystery?
Well, sort of. It becomes more of a mystery when the adult Viv, who's become a doctor, lies in a coma after a car crash that kills her husband. As soon as she gets this horrible news, Nikki goes to Memphis to be with her sister. That's when she discovers that Viv has been hiding things from her.
What do you mean by that?
I'm not going to say much because that's the fun of this novel.
Yeah.
Details of the past are released bit by bit to the big reveal at the end. This is a sister story about two girls whose only stability in their childhood was each other. Linton writes well, with vivid details and interesting characters. She grew up on a farm in Rossy and knows the North Country. Here's an example. We stayed in Carthage about 6 months. I remember the exact smell of the trailer. The tang of mouse, plus the chemical smell of the adhesive holding the carpet down and the paneling up, overlaid with the stink of sulfur water from the well, a heavy, hopeless smell.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that she knows the North Country, but that tone is pretty sad. Is that how most of the book is?
Well, there's a lot of sad things in this book, but actually it's not a sad book. The sisters have a close relationship, and as Nikki sits in the hospital next to Viv, she remembers the good parts of their childhood. Also, she talks to Viv, hoping Viv can hear her. And Nikki finds some solace in big dogs.
Big dogs. You know I love big dogs, Betsy.
I know. You have a couple Newfies, right?
Yes, wonderful Newfies.
These dogs, Tompkin, Dwaylen, and Balin, are English Mastiffs, and apparently they are enormous. Mm-hmm. When Nikki first comes to stay at her sister's house, she has no interest in these huge animals.
But does she end up falling in love with them?
Maybe not love, but...
Maybe not love, yeah.
Nikki takes comfort in them, slobber and all. They have lots of slobber. Here's a scene when Nikki returns to the house after being in the hospital all day with her sister. The dogs bumped gently into me, bending so that their knobbing sides swept along my legs, and then plunging their big skulls against me so I could rub their ears. It felt like an honor to have them surging around me, their eyes bright with welcome, their thick toenails sometimes landing on my sneakers, their bony tails whacking into my knees.
Sounds like big dogs to me. Well, so how long is Viv in a coma?
Weeks that turn into months. And while Nikki is at Viv's house, she gets a call from a detective that Viv has hired. He won't tell her anything about what he's investigating, but Nikki does her own sleuthing, including reading Viv's old diaries. She eventually convinces the detective that she should know what he's finding out.
Which is?
No spoilers.
Yeah.
As Nikki learns, she reflects about her sister, saying, "She was my whole family, and I barely knew her."
You know, maybe it's always kind of that way between people, you know?
Yeah, that we can't ever really know someone else.
Yeah.
And it's interesting in this novel because, of course, Viv can't speak for herself. It's a one-sided sister story.
Well, but then there's the title, She Taught Me Everything.
You're right. Nikki's childhood was totally shaped by her opinionated older sister. You'll have to read the book, Monica, so we can talk more about this.
It does sound like a really good summer read.
I'll leave you my copy.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you coming on this morning to share your thoughts about this book.
Thanks. My pleasure.
Betsy Kepes stops by every month to share a book review with a North Country connection right here on Northern Light. It's about 8:25. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski, and this is Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. So many events going on throughout the community, including in the Thousand Islands. Today is the deadline to register for the next full moon hike with the Minna Anthony Common Nature Center. It's in the Thousand Islands in fine view in between Alexandria Bay and Clayton. They say to wear sturdy hiking shoes, layered clothing, bring a headlamp or a flashlight, bonfire and snacks to follow. It is free, but registration is required. You can send an email to macnaturecenter@parks.ny.gov. That's the full moon hike with the Minna Anthony Common Nature Center in the Thousand Islands. The hike is this Friday. The deadline to register is today. Also, Juneteenth is tomorrow. It's also known as Freedom Day. It's a celebration to mark the day when the last remaining American slaves learned they were finally free from bondage in Galveston, Texas. About 2 years after President Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Communities throughout the North Country are celebrating freedom, Black culture, Black excellence, and joy this week, including at the National Abolition Hall of Fame and Museum outside of Syracuse. They're hosting an evening of film, discussion, and reflection. Milton Cernett is a professor emeritus of African American Studies at Syracuse University. He'll be presenting 3 films and facilitating discussions tomorrow evening at 7:30 at the Smithfield Community Center. Again, that's in connection with the National Abolition Hall of Fame and Museum. And Watertown's Juneteenth celebration is tomorrow at the Sweet Haven Church in Black River. Their celebration was created by and is still led by veterans and soldiers of Fort Drum. Music from Sean Seals and special guest speaker Colonel Phoenicia L. Jackson. And then coming up on Thursday, connected with Fort Drum, they're hosting Mountain Fest. The festival starts at noon this Thursday with a car show, family activities, and a parachute team. You can find out more from drum.armymwr.com. They will also be having music and a concert, including from Billy Carrington. He is a Nashville-based artist and will be going out on a little bit of his music. This is his song, Good Directions.
I was sitting there selling turnips on a flatbed truck, crunching on a pork rind when she pulled up. She had to be thinking this is where rednecks come from. She had Hollywood written on her license plate. She was lost and looking for the interstate, needing directions, and I was a man for the job. The caution light, there's a little country store with an old Coke sign. You gotta stop and was sitting there thinking about her pretty face, kicking myself for not catching her name. I threw my hat and thought, you fool, you could have been loved.